Hey, good evening, everyone. It is getting on into, I'm not even sure what day we are in the pandemic, quarantine, whatever it is. Glad you're all joining me again tonight, this Friday night for a reading. We're going to be going through chapter 4, which is September 11th, 2012. Before we get started, again, I just want to thank everyone for joining me. Thank you all. Who are a part of this event, who are supporting this. God bless y'all for all you're doing. I appreciate that. Whether you're here live or whether you watch it at a later time, either on one of the other social media aspects of it. But tonight, like I said, we're going to be reading chapter 4. But before we start, as I announce every night or every time we're reading, the first 1,000 people who sign up at shadowwarriorsproject.org for a reoccurring donation of $20 a month will get an autographed book by myself. And looking forward to that. Just so y'all know where that money goes, is Shadow Warriors Project is an organization that myself and my wife started after I got injured in Benghazi as private security contractors. There's not a lot out there for help. We have a workman's comp policy, and anybody who's dealt with that understands what that's like. Outside that, the families themselves, they don't have any support whatsoever. There's nothing there that's going to help them. There's no family services like in the military. There's no family support services, nothing like that. So my way and my wife's way of helping to continue serve all the guys that are serving us overseas, that are private security contractors, that are in that private military contracting business. We're there to help them out and make sure that, that things go well when they come home for doing all they've done. Well, let's get started. And, it's, we're starting to get into the meat of the book a little bit. We're going to see a little bit more. Let me check a few things here. So, September 11th, 2012. In the first hours of Tuesday, September 11th, 2012, Benghazi stirred from sleep as the mezzanines called for the Fajr. Prayer echoed across the ancient city. Allahu Akbar, God is supreme, they proclaimed. Ashadu anna Muhammadan Rasul Allah. Hayya al-Aslah. I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God. Come to prayer. The first of 5 daily devotions by pious Muslims resounded, then faded. Soon after, the sun edged over the horizon. Minutes later, at 6:43 a.m., 3 men in a car with Libyan police markings slowed to a stop on the gravel street on the north side of the U.S. diplomatic compound. One man, dressed in a police uniform, climbed to the second floor of the half-finished building next door to the Venezia restaurant that overlooked the compound. His uniform bore the insignia of the Libyan Supreme Security Council, known as the SSC, a coalition of militias that organized a revolutionary police force for the rough city. The other 2 men waited inside the idling car. The car displayed SSC emblems in the red, black, and green colors of the Libyan rebel movement. The elevated vantage point of the construction site gave the uniformed men a clear view over the wall and into the compound. He could see the buildings and fortifications, including the Chateau Christophe, the villa where Ambassador Christopher Stevens slept. The man also could see a flagpole where the American flag would fly throughout the day at half-staff to honor the 11th anniversary of September 11. The man recorded what he saw with a cell phone camera. In the days before the ambassador's visit, DS agents had asked that a marked SSC car be posted outside the compound around the clock when Stevens was on the property. Normally, when they arrived at the compound, SSC officers would check in with the locally hired guards. Yet neither the Libyan guards nor the American DS agents had been told that anyone from the SSC would be visiting the compound that morning, much less surreptitiously taking photographs of the layout. Operators have two words to describe unknown persons photographing secure locations without warning or permission: surveillance, to gain information, and reconnaissance, to gain tactical advantage. Surveillance of an American diplomatic site was worrisome, to be answered at a minimum by counter-surveillance to determine the observer's identity and intent. Reconnaissance was worse, as it anticipated offensive military or militant action. A Blue Mountain Libyan guard working the early shift spotted the photographer and went outside the compound gate to speak with him. Confronted by the unarmed guard, the man in the SSC uniform denied wrongdoing, returned to the car, and left with his two companions and his photographs. Even before the suspicious photographer showed up, Stevens had intended to spend the day inside the compound walls, to avoid making himself a tempting target to anyone with Al-Qaeda sympathies or other anti-American sentiments on the anniversary of 9/11. The ambassador's agenda included discussions at Villa C with a local appellate court judge, the owner of a shipping company whose brother had political aspirations, and a political analyst. His final scheduled meeting of the day would be with the Turkish Consul General, Ali Akin, who had helped the Americans when Stevens first landed in Benghazi in April of 2011. The Blue Mountain Guard's report about the photographer sent the American DS agents into high alert. Two agents asked the guard to show them where he saw the uniformed men, to determine what the photographer had been able to observe. A DS agent also informed officials at the CIA annex of the suspicious incident, as part of their long-standing agreement to share security information in the event that the GRS operators needed to be called in as a quick reaction force. In addition, the DS agent spread word about the photographer among 17 February militia commanders, presumed to be friendly to the Americans. The 17 February militia leaders told the DS agents that they would complain on the Americans' behalf to the local office of the SSC. Separately, Stevens reviewed a draft of a complaint about the incident that he wanted delivered to local police authorities. Early this morning, read the draft, as reported by Foreign Policy magazine, one of our diligent guards made a troubling report near our main gate. A member of the police force was seen in the upper level of a building across from our compound. It is reported that this person was photographing the inside of the U.S. Special Mission. Another complaint intended for the Benghazi office of the Libyan Ministry of Foreign Affairs began with a protest that requests for police protection at the compound during Stevens' visit had been ignored. We were given assurances from the highest authorities in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that all due support would be provided for Ambassador Stevens' visit to Benghazi. However, we are saddened to report that we have only received an occasional police presence at our main gate, it read. Many hours pass when we have no police support at all. September 11 was a typical half day of work at Libyan government offices, where bureaucrats had perfected the art of late arrivals, long lunches, and early departures. By the time Stevens approved the final drafts, no Libyan officials were around to receive them. The complaints would have to wait at least another day. In late morning, Stevens sent cables to Washington that included a weekly report of security incidents. He described Libyans' growing frustration with police and security, Previously, a local SSC official had acknowledged to Stevens that they were too weak to keep the country secure. Also on September 11th, Stevens approved a cable, later reviewed by the Daily Beast, that raised the disturbing possibility that two leaders of ostensibly friendly Libyan militias in Benghazi had soured on the United States. The cable said that militia leaders believed that the United States was supporting one of their rivals in his bid to become this country's first elected prime minister. If the rival leader won a vote scheduled for the following day, September 12, 2011, in the Libyan parliament, Stevens wrote, the two disgruntled militia leaders warned that they would not continue to guarantee security in Benghazi, a critical function they asserted that they were currently providing. Between sending cables, attending meetings, and doing paperwork, Stevens received an unsettling text from Gregory Hicks, the deputy chief of mission at the embassy in Tripoli, which made him Stevens' second in command among U.S. diplomats in Libya. Chris, Hicks wrote, are you aware of what's going on in Cairo? Stevens responded that he wasn't. So Hicks explained that protesters had stormed the U.S. embassy in the Egyptian capital. Stevens shared the news with a member of his security team and went on with his day. Separately, one of the DS agents in Benghazi, Alec Henderson, heard about the Cairo protest from a counterpart in Tripoli. From his post in the compound, Henderson called the annex to be sure that all the Americans in Benghazi were aware of the escalating unrest 700 miles away in Egypt. By all accounts, the Cairo demonstration was sparked by Egyptian media reports that an amateurish video trailer posted on YouTube for the anti-Islamic film called Innocence of Muslims, the video made by a Christian Egyptian American with a history of bank fraud and multiple aliases, defamed the Prophet Muhammad by depicting him as a bloodthirsty, womanizing buffoon, a homosexual, and a child molester. Fueling the anger among the Egyptian Muslims, erroneous reports suggested that the U.S. government was somehow involved in producing the film. The U.S. Embassy in Cairo might have unwittingly contributed to that impression by issuing a noontime statement awkwardly disavowing the video. As Gregory Hicks told Ambassador Stevens, the Egyptian protesters had scaled the embassy wall and burned the American flag. They replaced it with a black jihadist flag with white lettering in Arabic that read, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. September 11th, 2012 began as a typical day for the GRS operators at the annex. For the first move of the day, Tig accompanied Bob, the base chief, his deputy, and a case officer to a 9 a.m. meeting with Libyan contacts at an office on the 4th Ring Road, almost directly across from the back gate of the diplomatic compound. While there, Tig heard Bob and other staffers discussing how Libyan officials had asked about the location of the annex. Afterward, Tig provided security as the CIA officers went to the compound to inform the ambassador and the DS agents that the Libyans they'd met with had warned them about a threat to local government buildings that day. Tig listened as Stevens said he was concerned because he intended to remain inside the... wasn't concerned, I'm sorry. Let me correct that. Tig listened as Stevens said he wasn't concerned because he intended to remain inside the walls of the compound, and because the threat apparently was made by one group of Libyans against another. After a breakfast of oatmeal and eggs, Oz ran into Roan outside of Building A. They sat together enjoying coffee, conversation, and the warm morning breeze. Oz had been reading No Easy Day, a memoir by a former SEAL Team 6 member about the raid to kill Osama bin Laden. 4 days he'd been needling Roan. Hey, is writing books part of SEAL training? Knowing that Roan had mixed feelings about a SEAL discussing his work. I finished the book, Oz said. You can have it now. I know you're wanting to read it. Yeah, fuck you, Roan answered, returning to his coffee. Oz had a light daytime schedule of Call of Duty games, a workout, a nap, an afternoon snack, and a shower. At night, he was scheduled to escort a female case officer to a dinner with a prosperous Libyan businessman and his wife. Oz and the case officer, who had grown friendly with the Libyan couple through work contacts, left the annex around 6 p.m. They stopped at the internet cafe for coffee, then drove by the beach on their way to the host's upscale home. During the drive, the case officer idly wondered whether the annex needed quite so many security officers and GRS operators. Oz assured her that they needed every last one. As sunset approached shortly before 7 p.m., nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The evening was clear and Benghazi was its usual bustling, boisterous self. Oz, the case officer, and the Libyan couple sat down over a traditional North African meal of lamb kebab, dates, and dessert pastries made from delicate layers of fila dough with pistachios and honey. They talked about politics and life in their respective countries. After dinner, the host poured tea and brought out a hookah pipe, which it was missing the upper bowl that holds the tobacco. Using his combat knife, Oz hollowed out a pear and fashioned it into an improvised hookah bowl. Their host admired his skill and his knife, so Oz surprised him by making it a gift. During late afternoon, Tig and Rome began looking ahead to the next morning, when they were scheduled to protect the ambassador during a planned visit to the offices of the Benghazi-based Arabian Gulf Oil Company. The DS agents at the compound were unfamiliar with the oil company's neighborhood, as they normally relied on a local driver to get them around. But Tig and Roan knew the area well, so they agreed to serve as the advance team. As night fell, the two operators drove to the oil company's offices to scope the place out and to be sure they knew where to take Stevens the next day. On the way back to the annex at around 8:30 p.m., Roan and Tig drove past the compound. All was quiet. Roan called the DS agents on the cell phone. Hey, Roan told the DS agent, we figured out where the place is. Do you want us to come over now to tell you where it's at, or do you want to wait? The DS agent told Roan that they would wait until morning. As they drove back to the annex, Roan and Tig talked about how troubling they found it that the DS agents were so unfamiliar with their surroundings that they had to rely on a local driver to get them around Benghazi. In general, all the GRS operators worried that the ambassador's visit was rife with vulnerability. Highest on their list was the planned American corner ribbon cutting because it had been announced in advance. But as they talked among themselves, the operators concluded that Stevens could be targeted at any time and at any place during the 5-day visit because the State Department security team was so lightly staffed. Back at the annex around 9 p.m., Tig left Roan and the GRS team leader in the building C team room. He walked next door to the room he shared with Jack in building D. When Tig arrived, Jack was getting ready to hit the rack. He had said goodnight, then retreated to his separate side of the heavy curtain they hung for privacy. Jack undressed and took out his contact lenses, placing them on the shelf for easy access. He carefully arranged his clean clothes on a chair next to his bed and stuck his wallet, empty except for cash and a government ID, in a pocket of the pants he'd laid out. As always, he left his boxed wedding ring on the dresser, along with a mesh bag containing his credit cards, driver's license, and other personal items. The valuables would remain tucked away for the duration of the trip. Jack placed his holstered pistol at the head of his bed, so he'd be armed for a fight at a moment's notice. Jack glanced over to an open gear locker. Like the other GRS operators, he'd arranged his assault rifle, body armor, and other gear close by in response for the intel cable about a possible attack on the American target. Jack slid his two-way radio into a charger on a nightstand next to his bed. All the operators kept the handheld radios within reach around the clock, so they'd be instantly available in case of emergency. His setup complete, Jack was living up to the title of Commando. He sat naked on his bed, reading email on his laptop computer, and he began to mentally compose a message to his wife. Tonto had spent part of the day working on the computer mapping software, alerting annex case officers to known terrorist locations in Benghazi and the city of Derna, some 150 miles to the east. As night fell, Tonto and DB were on call as the quick reaction force. They'd relaxed with coffee as they watched a mythological action movie, Wrath of the Titans. During a break, DB called home to his family. They returned to the movie as they waited for Oz and the case officer to return from dinner. As the protests continued at the U.S. Embassy in Cairo, media reports described turmoil spreading to other Muslim countries throughout the region. The GRS operators had been told about the events in Egypt, but they neither saw nor heard anything to suggest that anyone in Benghazi was upset about the offensive YouTube video clip from an anti-Muslim movie. From all appearances, in the quiet neighborhood around the compound of the annex, September 11, 2012 would soon pass into history as an unremarkable day in Benghazi. Over at the compound at 7:40 p.m., Stevens and one of the DS agents escorted Turkish Consul General Ali Akin outside the main gate. The sun had set nearly an hour earlier, so it was dark as they stepped into the empty gravel road. Stevens said goodbye to Akin, then returned to Villa C. A half hour later, a British security team dropped off vehicles and communications equipment at the compound, a routine arrangement following the closure of the British consulate 3 months earlier. Nothing seemed to be out of ordinary when the ambassador went outside the gate with Akin, or when the British team left at around 9:30 p.m. By 9 p.m., the 7 Americans at the compound were settling down for the night. Communications specialist Sean Smith was in his room in Villa C, where he'd been chatting online with a friend from Eva. Earlier in the evening, when the friend said that they'd been in contact again soon, Smith answered ruefully, "Assuming we don't die tonight. We saw one of our police, the guard that guard the compound, taking pictures." 3 DS agents sat together outside the villa, talking under the stars near the swimming pool. One was Scott Wicklund, Stevens' personal security escort. Also outside was Wicklund's fellow cheesy mustache competitor, David Ubben. Relaxing with Ubben and Wicklund was one of the 2 DS agents who'd accompanied Stevens from Tripoli. The other DS agent who'd traveled with Stevens sat on sentry duty outside Villa C, watching a video on the flat-screen television in the living room. The 5th and highest-ranking DS agent in Benghazi, Alec Henderson, was in the building known as the Tactical Operations Center, the TOC. His shift was over, so normally the video security monitors inside the TOC would be unmanned, an established practice under which the compound relied on the local guards to keep watch over the perimeter when no agents were on duty. The idea was that those unarmed Libyan guards would radio the DS agents if trouble arose. But Henderson wanted to finish some paperwork, so he'd gone to the talk before turning in. All 5 DS agents carried only their pistols, as usual when they were within the compound walls. Their kits of body armor, helmet, radio, M4 assault rifle, other weapons and ammunition were stashed in their individual bedrooms. Wickland's and Henderson's kits were in Villa C. Ubben's was in the talk, and the kits belonging to the 2 Tripoli agents were in the Cantina building across from the talk. After bidding good night to the Turkish diplomat, Stevens retired to his room in the villa to unwind. A recent issue of the New Yorker magazine awaited him. But first, he recorded his thoughts. It is so nice to be back in Benghazi. Stevens wrote in his diary on a page dated September 11th, according to softrep.com. Much stronger emotional connection to this place. The people, but also the smaller town feel and the moist air and green and spacious compound. Stevens briefly recounted the day's meetings, then wrote a final uneasy diary line for the day. Never-ending security threats. ... The 3 dots of the eliphas trailed off toward the edge of the page. At 9:02 p.m., an unexpected vehicle drove down the gravel road outside the compound. A Toyota pickup truck with SSC police insignia. The pickup parked outside the main C1 gate. But the men inside remained in their seats, never engaging with the Libyan guards nor anyone else from the compound. The SSC vehicle pulled away 40 minutes after it arrived. It's possible that the vehicle's brief presence came in response to the Americans' request for around-the-clock SSC protection during the ambassador's visit. Another possibility was more nefarious. Its movements were somehow connected to the mysterious photographer who'd arrived that morning in a vehicle with similar markings. Perhaps it had nothing to do with either, or perhaps it was a signal. Almost the moment the SSC pickup pulled away from the compound, shots and an explosion rang out. Several dozen men, chanting in Arabic and firing AK-47s into the air, swarmed through the pedestrian entrance at the compound's main gate. Eventually, their numbers swelled to more than 60. Some were bearded, some were clean-shaven. Some wore black t-shirts and camouflage pants. Some wore jeans and white or brightly colored shirts. Some wore tactical military-style vests, and some wore flowing man jammies. Some carried walkie-talkies as well. Some were young and lean, and others were portly and middle-aged. A few hid their faces with scarves, but most didn't. The attackers didn't wear insignia, and none of the Americans saw where they'd assembled or knew exactly when they'd arrived outside the gate. One thing was certain. They displayed a common desire to terrorize Americans at the special compound, or worse. Who opened the gate wasn't clear, but responsibility for the entrance rested with the Blue Mountain Libyan guards. By some accounts, the armed invaders threatened the unarmed guards, who immediately acquiesced. A U.S. government review raised the possibility that the poorly skilled local guards left the pedestrian gate open after initially seeing the attackers and fleeing the vicinity. No evidence has shown that the Blue Mountain Guards were in league with the attackers, but maybe they were incompetent. As the report noted, they had left the gate unlatched before. Further complicating matters, the camera monitor in the guard booth at the front gate was broken, and new surveillance cameras shipped to the compound had yet to be installed. When the attackers rushed in, the 3 armed 17 February militiamen and the 5 unarmed Blue Mountain Guards fled to points south and east inside the compound. Relying on the Libyan guards to sound the alarm, alert the DS agents, and serve as the first line of defense had been a mistake, as they did none of those things before abandoning their posts. They scurried through the darkness into the direction of the cantina and Natak, where they knew they'd find the better trained and better armed DS agents. Some of the Libyans employed at the compound apparently kept going, all the way to the back gate that led out to 4th Ring Road. With the main gate open and the guards gone, the attackers met no resistance. They surged unchecked into the manicured grounds. Almost immediately beyond storming the compound, the attackers had the property under their complete control, without a single shot being fired in their direction. From that point forward, their actions suggested a blend of tactical planning, perhaps based on reconnaissance and opportunistic rampage. The attackers grabbed 5-gallon fuel cans that were stored alongside new, uninstalled generators next to the 17 February barracks. Just inside the main gate, they sloshed diesel fuel around the barracks building and on 2 vehicles parked nearby, then set them ablaze. As orange flames and acid black smoke shot into the night sky, the invaders rushed toward the heart of the compound, Villa C. Inside his room in the villa, Sean Smith heard the uproar as it began. "Fuck," he typed to one of his gaming friends. "Gunfire." Alec Henderson, the DS agent doing paperwork in the talk, heard shots too, along with an explosion. The DS agents were used to hearing gunfire and fireworks when the sun went down. These were common, but these sounded much closer than usual. Henderson stood from his desk and walked to the talk window, but saw only the sandbags stacked outside. As he returned to his desk, Henderson glanced at a large video monitor that simultaneously displayed a checkerboard of black and white images from roughly a dozen surveillance cameras scattered around the compound. His focus narrowed to a square on the monitor that showed the feed from the camera pointing at the main driveway. In a matter of seconds, the screen showed 16 to 20 armed attackers rushing into the compound through the front gate. At least 2 carried banners the size of twin bed sheets, one black and one white, both with Arabic writing. Tearing himself away from the monitor, Henderson flipped a switch on the alarm system, which blared its warning siren from speakers throughout the compound. A recorded voice repeatedly warned, "Duck and cover. Get away from the windows." Henderson pressed the talk button on the public address mic and shouted, "Attention on compound. Attention on compound. This is not a drill." He released the button and the recorded voice and alarm resumed, sounding like a British police siren with its endless, annoying, and alternating high-low cadence. Henderson grabbed his iPhone and called the nearby CIA annex and the U.S. Embassy in Tripoli. "Boss," he told John Martinek, the chief DS agent in Tripoli, "we're getting hit." As Henderson worked to alert the compound and secure help, gunshots rang out from multiple locations as terrorists gained control of the property. Following protocol, he returned to work and established as the emergency communications officer, using his cell phone and radios to remain in contact with the annex, Tripoli, and his fellow DS agents on the compound. The sudden explosion of gunfire and chanting from the men rushing into the compound roused the 4 DS agents at Villa C. The Tripoli DS agent who was watching a movie ran outside to join Scott Wicklund, Dave Ubben, and the other Tripoli agent on the patio. Ubben ran about 50 yards to the other side of the compound, with the Tripoli agents toward the Cantina and the Talk to collect their M4 assault rifles, armor, and other gear they had from their rooms. As Stevens' body man, Wicklund had primary responsibility for the ambassador's safety. He ran inside Chateau Christophe and retrieved his kit, which included a combat shotgun along with his assault rifle, body armor, and a radio. Wicklund quickly rounded up Stevens and Sean Smith in the semi-darkened villa. Shouts and chants and pops of gunfire echoed outside. Wicklund instructed the ambassador and the communications expert to don their body armor as he locked all three of them, behind the gate in the villa's safe haven area. The DS agent gave Stevens his cell phone and radioed Alec Henderson on the Talk to let him know their location and that they were secure for the moment. With his rifle, shotgun, and pistol ready, Wicklund found a protected place inside the safe haven from which he could watch the gate without being seen by anyone on the other side. The defensive position gave him a clear line of fire to anyone attempting to breach the safe haven. Using Wicklund's cell phone and his own, Stevens feverishly called the embassy in Tripoli and his local contacts for help. Stevens twice dialed the number for his top deputy in Tripoli, Gregory Hicks, but Hicks didn't answer. Around 9:45 p.m. at the U.S. Embassy in Tripoli, Chief DS Agent John Martinek burst into the villa where Hicks was watching one of his favorite TV shows. Greg, Martinek yelled, the consulate's under attack. By calling the compound a consulate, Martinek was using common diplomatic shorthand. The Benghazi special mission was never officially a consulate. After delivering the message, Martinek rushed back to the embassy's Tactical Operations Center. Hicks reached for his phone and found two missed calls, one from Stevens' cell phone number and the one from a number he didn't recognize. He hit reply on the second number, and Steven answered, Greg, we are under attack. As he spoke with Stevens, Hicks moved toward the embassy's Talk. Cell phone service was spotty in Tripoli, and Stevens' call cut out as Hicks began to reply, okay. He repeatedly tried both numbers from the missed calls on his phone, but couldn't get through. When he reached the embassy Talk, Hicks found John Martinek on the phone with Alec Henderson, his counterpart in Benghazi, who remained holed up in the Talk at the Benghazi compound. Henderson reported that all 7 Americans on the compound were accounted for and that the ambassador and Sean Smith were inside the safe haven with Scott Wicklund. Martinek spread the word. Hicks showed another DS agent the unfamiliar number on his phone. That's the one he'd used to reach Stevens. The agents told Hicks that the number came from a cell phone belonging to the ambassador's body man, Scott Wicklund. Martinek ended his call with Henderson and briefed Hicks, telling him that at least 20 armed attackers had breached the Benghazi compound. Hicks phoned Bob, the CIA chief in Benghazi, who told him that the Annex was aware and preparing to send help. The Annex's small team of operators was jocking up, each one ready, willing, and confident they could repel the attack and save the trapped Americans. When he left Villa C, Ubun ran to his bedroom in the Talk to grab his kit. One of the Tripoli DS agents also rushed to the Talk, mistakenly believing that the ambassador was inside. When the agent learned that Stevens was in the villa, he sprinted several yards across a brick patio and into the cantina to reach his bedroom so he could armor himself. Then he ran into his fellow Tripoli-based DS agent, and together they decided to return to Villa C to help Chris Stevens, Sean Smith, and Scott Wicklund. A brick driveway roughly 5 yards wide separated the cantina from Villa C. When the two DS agents cautiously stepped outside the cantina, they bumped into one of the local Blue Mountain guards who'd fled when the attack began. Staying together, the three men approached the driveway that they knew they'd have to cross to reach Villa C. Armed intruders crowded the darkened driveway, not far from where they intended to cross. Trying to reach Villa C, they would have exposed their whereabouts and made them easy targets in a firefight. The Tripoli DS agents and the Blue Mountain Guard retreated inside the cantina and barricaded themselves in a back room. After gathering their guns and gear, Dave Ubben remained with his fellow DS agent Alec Henderson inside the securely locked TOC, working the phones and radios while watching the video monitors to see the ongoing attack around them. In addition to the U.S. Embassy in Tripoli and the nearby CIA annex, they called the headquarters of the 17th February Militia and the Diplomatic Security Command Center in Washington, where the local time was approaching 4 p.m. Within minutes of the attack, the 7 Americans at their special mission compound were thrown into the defensive and separated into 3 locations. 2 Benghazi-based DS agents, Alex Henderson and Dave Ubben, were locked inside the TOC. 2 DS agents from Tripoli were barricaded inside the cantina with a local guard, and Ambassador Stevens, communications expert Sean Smith, and DS agent Scott Wicklund were left to fend for themselves in the Villa safe haven. The armed invaders had gained the upper hand with a surprise assault. Now they roamed freely through the dimly lit compound, firing their weapons and chanting as they approached the buildings in packs, destroying what lay in their paths, some stealing what they could carry, all trying to find the Americans. Immediately after Alec Henderson's initial call for help, the two-way radios scattered throughout the annex snapped to life. All GRS, meet in the CP. The radio call came from the GRS team leader, calmly but firmly ordering the operators to muster in the command post, another name for the sensitive compartmented information facility in Building C. All of the operators were on the annex property except for Oz, who was still at dinner with the case officer. Tonto and DB, unwinding with Wrath of the Titans, switched off the movie, rose from the couch, and began to gather themselves. Tonto, relaxing in cargo shorts, didn't think the radio call sounded especially urgent. He figured they were being hauled in for a routine dressing down, having somehow pissed off their bosses. It had happened before, such as the time Tonto hung a photo in the command post of actor Robert Downey Jr. from the movie Tropic Thunder, captioned with the line from the movie, "Never go full retard." "Hey, Tonto," DB asked, "what'd you do now?" Tonto wondered the same thing, but he wasn't worried. He figured he'd take his licks and return to the movie. Less than 20 seconds after the first call, the radio sounded again. "We need GRS in the room now." The tone was altogether different. Tonto and DB caught each other's eyes. "Shit, something's really happening," Tonto said as he moved toward the door. Unaware that American lives were in danger, Tonto grew excited at the prospect of a sudden night move. "We're going to get to do something fun tonight." Tonto glanced at his wrist. No matter what anyone else would say later about the attack beginning at 9:42, Tonto was certain his watch read 9:32. He and DB grabbed their kits, including lightweight machine guns in addition to their pistols and assault rifles. They jocked up and moved towards Building C. The operators hustled, swiftly but not frantically, to avoid panicking annex workers who hadn't been trained to be calm and collected in battle. The GRS team leader met them outside on the driveway, about halfway to Building C. "The consulate is being overrun," he told Tonto and DB. In the distance, they heard explosions and gunfire from the direction of the compound. Tonto heard someone shouting in Arabic on a megaphone. He couldn't make out much, but he could hear the distant amplified chant, "Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar." Still naked in his room, Jack set aside his laptop when he heard the first muster call. He hadn't begun typing his nightly email to his wife, but he figured he'd do it. So after a short interruption, at the first call, Jack began to dress, pulling on his jeans without underwear. His roommate, Tig, in night clothes, slid on flip-flops. "Hang out here," Tig said from the other side of the hanging blanket that divided their rooms. "I'll see what's going on." Tig stepped outside. As he did, he heard the second muster call and ran across the driveway to Building C. "Hey, state is under attack," the team leader told Tig, who immediately turned and ran back to Building D. He found Jack shirtless outside. "The consulate's getting attacked," Tig said. Both doubled their pace, pulling on civilian clothes, then jocking up with a full array of weapons: armor, chest rigs containing ammunition, helmets, night vision goggles, and other equipment. They also carried personal medical kits with clotting agents, sterile Curlex gauze dressings, and tourniquets, already unwrapped so they could be applied with one hand if the other was injured, blown off, or holding a gun. That was among the tip Rohn had reinforced during his medical training exercise. As the operators prepared to move out, each grabbed his individual go bag, stuffed with items including a compass, a GPS unit, extra ammunition, a flashlight, batteries, and in some cases, their diplomatic passports. Jack popped into his contact lenses, but he did so too quickly, and they weren't orientated correctly. He left Building D with blurry vision. From the talk at the U.S. Embassy in Tripoli, Deputy Chief of Mission Gregory Hicks called the Operations Center at State Department in Washington to report the attack. He let officials there know what response was planned. Then he made a flurry of calls to Libyan officials. Hicks called the Chief of Staff to Libyan President Mohammed Magharif to inform him of the attacks and asked for immediate help. He made a similar request to the Chief of Staff of the Libyan Prime Minister. Then Hicks called the director of the American desk at the Libyan Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Abdurrahman Al-Ghanas. Less than 3 weeks earlier, Al-Ghanas had held Chris Stevens' hand in Tripoli as they shared the honors at the consular section ribbon-cutting ceremony. Now Hicks wanted Al-Ghana to repay Stevens' friendship by helping to save his life. During a phone call between Hicks and Bob, the annex chief, they agreed to mobilize a response team consisting of American operators based at the embassy in Tripoli. One team member would be former Navy SEAL Glenn Doherty, also known as Bub, who'd be joining his friends Rohn, Jack, and Tonto. Hicks and other Tripoli embassy staffers went to work chartering a small Libyan commercial jet to fly the reinforcements to Benghazi. Meanwhile, the embassy's defense attaché called leaders of Libya's Air Force and other Libyan armed forces seeking help. The defense attaché also regularly updated officials in Washington and the U.S. Military Africa Command, known as AFRICOM. Embassy staffers called officials at Benin International Airport for logistical support and cooperation in anticipation of the arrival of operators from Tripoli and an eventual evacuation of all Americans and from Benghazi. David McFarland, the embassy's political section chief, had just returned to Tripoli after 10 days in Benghazi as the special mission's acting principal officer. McFarland called his militia contacts and trusted Libyans who'd worked various jobs at the compound to urge them to repulse the attack with overwhelming force. Calls also went out from the American diplomats to leaders of the 17th February Martyrs Brigade militia, officials at the United Nations, the diplomats in friendly nations, embassies in Libya. Hicks then called Washington with another update. At 10:05 p.m. Benghazi time, or 4:05 p.m. in Washington, the State Department Operations Center issued an alert to the White House Situation Room, the FBI, and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Among other key government and intelligence agencies, U.S. diplomatic mission in Benghazi under attack, it said. Approximately 20 armed people fired shots. Explosions have been heard as well. Ambassador Stevens, who is currently in Benghazi, is in the compound safe haven. Within 5 minutes of Alec Henderson's first Mayday call from the compound, Tonto, DB, Roan, Tig, and Jack were jocked up and assembled outside Building C. They talked among themselves, asking each other if anyone knew how many Americans were on the compound and what kind of weapons were there. The answer, 7 Americans with light weapons. From the gunfire and explosions they continued to hear, and from the reports of perhaps several dozen attackers, the operators knew they'd be dealing with what Tonto called a substantial force. Tig told the GRS team leader that they might want to drive up a narrow, rutted dirt pathway immediately west of the annex, which the operators called Smuggler's Alley, because it would lead them directly to 4th Ring Road and the compound's back gate. But the team leader said he'd heard from the DS agents that they thought the compound's back gate had been breached, so the operators should pick another route. The GRS team leader told the operators they wouldn't be going in alone. He said they'd be linking up with a large group of 17 February fighters who'd be fulfilling their militia's promise to serve as a quick reaction force. The TL told him that the attackers seemed to be armed with AK-47s and rocket-propelled grenades, and that the Americans at the compound were separated into several groups. The TL instructed the 5 operators to stay ready and wait for his signal to leave. They tossed their gear into a dark blue BMW sedan and a boxy black Mercedes SUV. Both were armored with bullet-resistant windows and tires called run flats, designed to live up to the name if hit by bullets, spikes, or shrapnel. Both vehicles were tuned like race cars, but dusty and worn outside, so they wouldn't attract attention or additional notice as they moved toward the compound. The operator staged the vehicles outside Building C, pointing toward the gate, with the BMW in front. Roan got behind the wheel of the BMW, Jack rode shotgun, and Tig slid into the back seat, armed with a grenade launcher in addition to a lightweight machine gun with 2 bandoliers of ammunition. Tonto and DB jumped into the front seat of the Mercedes, with Tonto behind the wheel. Along with his usual weapons, Tonto brought a light machine gun with a bandolier of ammunition. He knew that there were other similar bandoliers already in the car, in case he needed more ammo. The GRS team leader remained outside near Building C, talking on his cell phone. Several of the operators demanded to know what they were waiting for. The team leader pulled away from his phone. "We need to come up with a plan," he said, referring to how they'd coordinate with the Feb 17 militia. Also standing outside the vehicle talking on phones were Bob, the annex chief, and his second in command, a CIA officer who'd earned the operators' esteem by treating them with respect. Inside the vehicles, the 5 GRS operators triple-checked their gun sights, tightened their armor, and tried to figure out why they hadn't already left. They likely could have reached the compound on foot in time. They'd be in the time they'd been waiting. Mostly sat quiet, but Tonto tried to keep the atmosphere light, but complaining that he had nowhere to put a coffee cup he'd brought with him. Spend $250,000 on a damn Mercedes, and there's no cup holder. What kind of bullshit is that? As 5 minutes passed and they grew tense listening to the conversations outside the cars, the operators got the distinct impression that the rescue plan being discussed somehow didn't include them. Standing outside the Mercedes, Tig called out, "Hey, we got to go now. We're losing the initiative." "No, stand down. You need to wait," Bob, the base chief yelled back. We need to come up with a plan, the team leader repeated. It's too fucking late to come up with a plan, Tig yelled. We need to get in the fucking area and then come up with a plan. Tonto got out of the Mercedes and approached the team leader with Bob. Approached the team leader and Bob. He asked them to request U.S. military air support, specifically an unmanned ISR drone named for its ability to provide intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Tonto also asked them to call in a heavily armed AC-130 Spectre gunship, a 4-engine fixed-wing plane designed for lethal ground assaults. In the meantime, Tonto told the bosses he and the operators were overdue to move out. The CIA chief looked at Tonto, then at the team leader, then back to Tonto. Tonto felt as though the chief was looking right through him. No, Bob said. Hold up. We're going to have a local militia handle it. Tonto couldn't believe his ears. He turned to the team leader. Hey, we need to go. No, the LT said. We need to wait. The chief is trying to coordinate with 17 Feb and let them handle it. What do you mean, let them handle it? Tonto demanded. He had little confidence in the 17 February militia, whose members he and several other operators considered to be as liable to turn on them as to serve alongside them. Tonto especially wouldn't trust the militia on its word when the objective was to save American lives. We need to go. We're not letting Feb 17 handle it. Tonto's memory flashed back to the airport standoff months earlier. He believed that Bob was repeating the slow go, stand down, let the friendly militia handle it approach he'd taken with hostile militiamen held up Roan and other GRS operator. That incident was resolved peacefully, without injuries, and without exposing the CIA presence in Benghazi. When Roan and his companion demonstrated that they wouldn't be robbed without a fight. This time, Tonto thought, Bob was taking the same passive tactic, even though the fight had already begun and the Americans were losing, possibly dying. I've been through this before, Tonto told the TL, when the chief didn't let us go when our guys were in trouble. Go ask Tyrone. He's right over there. He was one of the guys out there when the chief said to have 17 Feb handle it and held us back. Tonto, I know, said the TL. I'm working on it. Tonto returned to the Mercedes SUV and told DB, this is a bunch of fucking bullshit. DB was incredulous. His head slumped forward in frustration. Yet both knew that it wasn't over. Plans were still forming and changing, with input and discussions flying between Benghazi, Tripoli, and Washington. They didn't know when Bob was speaking. They didn't know whom Bob was speaking with, but they hoped that the wait order would be reversed quickly and they'd be given the green light. Tonto got on the radio and relayed his conversation to Roan, Jack, and Tig in the BMW. Roan looked over through the car window, his expression trapped between anger and disgust. Tonto held his palms up and shrugged. Roan got on the radio and called out, we gotta go, gotta go, gotta go. His vision still blurred from his misaligned contact lenses. Jack stared out the window of the BMW, wondering whether whoever was attacking the compound might try a simultaneous assault on the annex. He experienced the familiar yin and yang of the moment. This belief that this was happening, contrasted by the sense that he had expected it all along. As he considered the situation, Jack remembered that he'd left his laptop on. The email that he'd intended to write his wife remained unwritten. From the driver's seat in the Mercedes, Tonto noticed a civilian named Henry, an owlish, balding, olive-skinned man with glasses, walking across the annex driveway. Tonto bounded out of the SUV. Henry was a U.S. citizen in his 60s, working as an interpreter at the annex. Some translators in hostile areas are designated combat interpreters because they'd had a specialized weapons training. Henry wasn't among them. He was an office worker who reviewed, and translated documents. from Arabic and occasionally went out on operations no more dangerous than dinner with locals. Tonto stopped Henry in his tracks. I've been through this before, and we need you to come with us, Tonto said. If we're linking up with 17 Feb, none of us speaks the language well enough to communicate. We need you here. Tonto, Henry replied, I am not weapons qualified. It doesn't matter, Tonto said. He pulled out a pistol and handed it to Henry. Here's your weapon. Go get your helmet and your armor. We need you. Without hesitating, Henry said, Roger, I'll be right back. Barely 2 minutes later, Henry was seated in the back of the Mercedes, his armor and helmet secured, Tonto's gun in his hand, and a look of pure fright on his weathered face. Tonto thought he resembled a Middle Eastern version of the comic Bob Newhart. He handed Henry an extra magazine of ammunition. When Jack saw Henry jocked up and ready, he felt a flush of admiration. Here's a guy, Jack thought, who's an administrative guy and somebody who gave him body armor and a helmet and a pistol. He volunteered to come basically on a suicide mission. For us, it's our job to do stuff like that. His job is to sit behind a desk and interpret Arabic into English. But he's doing what he thinks is right. From their idling vehicles, the operators could vaguely see the orange flames rising from the compound. With their doors flung open, they could hear chanting in the distance. Tonto grabbed his radio so everyone in the annex would hear his message. He hoped it also would reach someone on the same frequency at the compound. Tonto repeated his earlier request as a demand. Get us an ISR drone and a Spectre gunship. Tonto didn't know it, but one part of his demand was already being fulfilled. Within the first half hour of the attack, at 9:59 p.m., the U.S. military's Africa Command ordered a drone surveillance aircraft to reposition itself over the special mission compound. It would take more than an hour to reach Benghazi, but once there, the drone could monitor events and beam live images to Washington. But a request for close air support wouldn't be so easy to fulfill. A Pentagon spokesman would say later that none of the Americans pushing AC-130 gunships were anywhere within range of Benghazi on the night of September 11th, 2012. As minutes ticked by and the operators waited for clearance to leave, the air in the vehicle grew thick with tension. The operators imagined bloody scenes of what was happening to their countrymen less than a mile away. And the longer they sat idle, the more likely the same fate awaited them. As the hour neared 10 p.m., with the operators' radios turned to the same frequency as those at the compound, they heard the voice of one of the DS agents in the compound talk. Alec Henderson or Dave Ubben. We're being attacked, one yelled, his voice tight with stress. There's approximately 20 to 30 armed men with AKs firing. We're being attacked. We need help. We need help now. Adrenaline surged through the operators' veins, but again they were told to wait. They were used to following orders, and they knew that insubordination could mean their jobs or worse. But a shared thought took hold in both vehicles. If they weren't given permission to move out soon, they'd take matters into their own hands. Well, that's the end of chapter 4. We will be reading chapter 5 Wednesday of next week at the same time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. here in Colorado. But before we break to questions, the one thing I did want to give a shout out to is I wanted to give a shout out to all those that have been supporting me, who have been helping get this pushed out to all the viewers out there, to their to those influencers who help push it out to their followers, and that's Eric Trump, Charlie Daniels, Travis Tritt, Josh Turner, Nine Line Apparel, JT with Article 15 and Black Rifle Coffee. Let's see who else. I know I'm missing some other people. The NRA, I want to appreciate that as well for them giving that out, giving that shout out. Some friends, Markel, with Special Operations Wounded Warrior Phil Tabb with Swim with a Mission, Max Martini himself, Coat of Arms, which is a filming company up in Canada, and Joshua Perry, who is with Baden K9, a good friend who's been a avid listener, avid watcher, and a great friend. So I just want to share that with everybody. Somebody I missed out on, that's Keith Mark with Hunter Nation. Hunter Nation is a great organization as well. You ought to go check them out. I am an advisory board member as well there. But thank you all for joining in. And again, all those listeners out there and all those that are viewing or view this at a later time, again, you know, the offer stands. The first 1,000 people who sign up for that $20 reoccurring donation will get a autographed book by me of 13 hours. But the other thing I want to ask is I want to ask everybody to find it in their hearts to be able to help the contractors and those families that are sacrificing every day. Somewhere today, tonight, as we're doing this, there's somebody out there. There's some contractor, some private security officer who is serving on some rooftop in some third world country, giving us the right and protecting our rights to do this right alongside our military veterans. You know, with a small donation of $10, especially a month on a reoccurring basis, we are going to be able to put all of those contractors, those security contractors, kids who have sacrificed so much for this country, we'd be able to put them through college, make sure they have that support, cover their house payments when they can't make those house payments. As we all know, we're all in some hard times right now, but I really ask for that and hope that hope you all out there really do that, because, you know, you can really make a difference in someone's life tonight. So God bless you all, and thank you for tuning in. And, you know, let's open it up to the Q&A. I know a lot of people are telling me that that's one of the better parts of this. So I want to thank you all, and let's see what we're coming up with here. Okay, looks like we got quite a few starting out here. And I would expect quite a few with the subject matter that we got into on Chapter 4. Larry Kinzer asks, how long were you and the other guys deployed in Benghazi? Larry, we weren't deployed as a team. Each individual had a different amount of time there. Tig had been deployed to Libya. He was on his third trip of 60 days. Myself, I had only been there about 45 days, as well as Jack and Tonto and DB and Roan. They had been there at least, I think Tonto had served another trip or two up in Tripoli, but this was his first trip, I believe, in Benghazi, and he'd been there about 60 days because him and Roan had extended to stay on during the visit of the ambassador. Next, we have Joe Garcia. My question for today is, was writing this book cathartic for you fellas? I'm sure such a horrible event would be almost unbearable. I couldn't even imagine. My father was a World War II veteran, and he rarely ever spoke about his experiences. To this day, I take great pride in being my father's daughter. Joe, you know, I won't speak for, well, I will speak a little bit because I know all the guys have mentioned how cathartic it was. But for me especially, this was very cathartic. It was very healing in being able to tell that story. And I continue to tell that story when I do public speaking. I use this as the crux of talking about leadership, about overcoming adversity, and also talking about my faith. Because I firmly believe that we had a seventh man on our team that night, and that was the Lord above. And without him, the outcome wouldn't have been what it was. And I also want to thank you and your family for your service, and your father for his service in World War II. So thank you for that as well. Next, we have Tom Hinkle. Tom asks, Mark, how can you not be angry with the way the government abandoned you all? You know, Tom, it would be easy to let this be a negative in my life, to be angry and to let that anger overtake, my emotions and my well-being in general. As I said, I have a strong relationship with the Lord, and I got to believe that everything happens for a purpose. It's not always the good things, but it's the bad things that happen to us that build that fortitude, that willingness and desire to overcome. And without those things, they wouldn't happen. And also, I kind of when I look back now on everything that's happened since Benghazi, one of the reasons I believe that it was the reason it happened the way it did is, the administration at the time, along with Hillary Clinton, had made this into a big deal about some video, which we all know has been debunked since then. Through this and us surviving and us coming out in public and writing this book, we were all probably instrumental in that, encouraging Congress to open up the investigations into Benghazi, which also led to that investigation finding out about the private email server of Hillary Clinton, which all of that domino effect, I believe, was instrumental in the reason why we now have Donald Trump as our president and not Hillary Clinton. And, I may upset a few people out there, but for me personally, I think that's a great thing. So I got to believe all things happen for a reason. Let's see. Joe Garcia asks again, I know it was your arm that was badly injured. How's your arm at this point? Well, as you can all see, it works pretty good. It's attached. I don't have much feeling in it. I lost 2 inches of the radial bone. Pretty much got disintegrated, 2 inches of the median nerve. The ulna was shattered, as well as contusions to both the ulna and the radial nerves as well. I'm just proud. I'm glad that Tig was able to get a tourniquet on it, that we were able to get to medical help and save it. I struggle with it every day. It's painful every day, but, again, it's a reminder of what I went through, but more than anything, what I survived. And it reminds me of Ty and Glenn every day and what that ultimate sacrifice really is. So thank you for that question, Joe. John Nepper. I hope I pronounced that right. Where can we find the Shadow Warriors t-shirt? We are getting an order from, these shirts are produced by 9 Line Forest. 9 Line doesn't carry the Shadow Warriors shirt, but we have an order on hand. And once it gets here, we will have them up on our store, on our website. Our website is shadowwarriorsproject.org. So they will be up there soon, along with some other things that we're going to be having. So please look for that there. They should be up there soon. Chad Shockey. Wicklund appeared combat ineffective most of the engagement. Was that accurately represented? And did he recover and re-engage at any point? Unfortunately, the State Department guys fell into, I think, a little bit of that being overwhelmed by the situation, a little bit of that fight or flight. And as far as I know from all the guys that went over to the consulate, to the compound, to the special mission compound, none of the State Department guys anytime during the night fired a shot. But I also got to give it to them that they stood tall as they could, and they did what they were trained to do. The training at the time by the State Department, which all had been, the majority of it had been acquired from the years of experience that they had in Afghanistan and Iraq. The difference being, though, that in Iraq and Afghanistan, you had plenty of military, plenty of other contractors and other organizations, both U.S. and allies that could come to help at a moment's notice. And our U.S. military's presence there, obviously everyone's familiar with that. And those same tactics, which was, get your principal officer, put him into a safe room, hard point, and wait for the cavalry to come. Well, unfortunately, when you're dealing with a country like Benghazi, where we did not have a U.S. military presence outside of the consulate and the CIA annex, when that call came out for help and when they followed their training procedures, there was no one to come. So we were the only ones there. And it wasn't our job to, it was our, as in official job, but it was a sense of duty that we had. That is why we responded and did what we did that night. Janet Healy, Rear Admiral Charles M. Goitet, the commander of the USS Stennis Carrier Strike Group, on station in the Persian Gulf area during the attack in Benghazi. That night, he was summarily relieved of command, allegedly for inappropriate leadership judgment. But many believe he was relieved of command for disobeying the order to stand down and was preparing to send a strike package to Benghazi. Would you happen to know if that's true or not? Janet, I cannot confirm that at all, but I do know from people I've talked with since that there was more than one group that was probably going to be sent or that were under similar situations as that commander of the USS Stennis Carrier Strike Group. I have heard of others that were relieved of duty for very similar things. So I do believe that is probably true, but I cannot confirm it beyond a shadow of a doubt. I have not ever been able to confirm any of the stories I've been told from more than one source. Let's see. Next, we have Bob Dickinson. Says, how do I give Mark? So if you are wanting to donate, you can go to shadowwarriorsproject.org, click on the donate button there and follow through that, and your donation will be made directly to the bank account for Shadow Warriors Project. And you will also receive notification of that and verification of that. That is one way. The other way is you can also go to the website. If you would prefer to send a check, you can do that as well. Thank you, Bob. Mariah Boggs. When I read 13 Hours, I always wanted to know if Ambassador Stevens and Sean could have went somewhere else other than the villa. So Ambassador, there was really no other place at that point that they could have went. That was the safest spot that Scott Wickland could have got them to. Unfortunately, set up or tertiary exfil points. They didn't have the vehicle staged in the ways that I would have done it. I had a second that. Next, we have Bob Dickinson again. In retrospect, is there anything that could have been done differently at the compound? Sounds like Feb Militia was a shit show. Yes, Feb 17 was a shit show. Benghazi was a shit show of a place. That's the reason why we were all there. Could have anything been done? Yeah, had the ambassadors and had the DS agents request for more security equipment for large teams been given and been adhered to and followed, then I believe that would have had a greater deterrent effect than what they had with only having 5 security officers an ambassador and a information or communications officer. I think that would have been, we'd have seen a whole lot different outcome had that been followed through. So thank you. Great question, Bob. Julie Malone. So asks, do I ever see Tig and is he single? Laugh out loud. Sorry, Julie. Tig is happily married, has a wonderful wife and two wonderful twins, a boy and a girl. He also has some older stepchildren as well. So Tig's off the market as far as I know. And I wouldn't want to deal with his wife either. So next is Steve Barity. Was the team leader giving Bob as much pushback to get into the fight as the operators in the car? Thank you for your service, Trump 2020. Steve, no, the team leader wasn't, as far as I know. Now, again, I'm going to caveat this and relate, and everything I'm going to relate to you was related to me by the 5 guys that I talked with that night, that I served with that night, because I wasn't on the annex at that time when that. But everybody to a T, to include Roan, when I talked to him in between firefights up on the rooftop, they were not, the team leader was not given as much pushback. Weldon Miller. Weldon, is Jack still working or did he retire? Wondering why his identity has never. Well, Weldon, Jack, he chose to remain incognito for a various number of reasons. Because of the political ramifications of this, he didn't want him or his family to have to deal with that. And I think he wanted to deal with Benghazi in his own way. He chose to do it that way. I respect what he did. He's a stand-up guy. I'd go to war with him anytime. Next, we have Tanya Snyder. Tanya, thank you for the question. Your opinion, do you feel you all were set up, or Ambassador Stevens was sent there because he knew about the weapons and the money Hillary and Obama sent over there? Well, Tanya, I can't verify or validate any money or weapons that I ever saw get delivered to Libya. Obviously, there was support and help that was sent there. The nature of it, I don't know exactly, but I never saw any of that myself. Do I think we were set up? No, I don't think we were set up by anybody other than the Ansar al-Sharia, which was the terrorist organization, the militia that attacked us. And a lot of people always ask me who's responsible for this. Ultimately, the responsibility lays with the militia that attacked us. Had they not attacked us, Ambassador Stevens would not have died, and I think the whole thing would have been different. I'd probably still be working as a private security contractor myself. But so do other people bear responsibility? Yes, I believe they do, because how they responded to the actions of that militia had a direct effect on the outcome that night, and had a direct outcome on the hours after the initial attack, and through the attack on us, as well as through the response afterwards by the administration. Hope that answers your question, Tanya. Next, we have Lena Gall. Were they running guns from Turkey to Benghazi? Anything that gave me any indication that they were running guns, I never saw any of that, so I can confirm that. All I can tell you is what I saw. And, like I said, I was with a lot of the case officers a lot of the times when they were meeting with people, and I did that. I hope that answers that. A lot of that those questions have been out there. As an open source information, the one thing I do know is that State Department was always, and this goes for not just Benghazi, goes for anywhere around the world that's a hot spot, especially. They were always looking for our surface to air missile systems from whatever countries that, the various countries out there around country to other, both nefarious and nations, because they are so dangerous. So that is something that they're always kind of looking for. Question, but did you and the cook at the annex have a relationship? No, the cook, Cook was just a stand-up guy, and when called for, he wasn't going to go down without a fight either. He grabbed a shotgun and was ready to go. Let's see, Brett. Brett, I'm sorry, I'm going to probably bastardize your last name. Harvard, I'm not even going to try it. Sorry, Brett, but thanks for the question. The movie described the firefight on the roof at the compound as the unfriendlies coming from Zombieland. Did you use that term? Yes, the north and east of our compound was basically what we called Zombieland. It was a stockyard and some open space, and both at night and sometimes during the day. It looked very much like what you would think of as Zombieland, and very much like the movie. So they did a great job of that, yeah, and it was called Zombieland. Nick asks, do you think the Benghazi incident may get brought back up when Hillary's email server is finished being investigated in the process of draining the swamp? Nick, we can only hope, and I do believe that it will. There's going to be, she did a lot of her work on that and probably most of it. So I do believe that is going to probably be the case. Hopefully we'll find out some more information on that. Randy Bailey. Randy asks, if you were ever to run into Miss Clinton or Mr. Obama, would you say anything to them? Haven't ever really thought about that. Well, I can't even say that because I was trying to get on to meet Miss Clinton on her book tour, but was never able to make that happen. But probably the only thing I would do is I would introduce myself, let them know who I am, and probably just enjoy the look on their face because they would wonder what was going to come next. Growing up in the military, I don't really have to respect the person, but I got to respect the position. And I know that's kind of an out on that, but I don't harbor any hate for them. I don't have time in my life for hate. Hate is one of those things, if you allow it in, it's really going to foster more hate, and that's something that I don't need in my life. And so, I've forgiven them for whatever. They're going to have to answer to either the American people if we continue to demand it, and to their maker when they meet him as well. And I'm satisfied with the outcome that'll come from that. That kind of ties up the questions. We reached a total of 19 questions tonight. Thank you very much. If there's any last minute questions, please jump on there now. If not, we're going to cut it loose here in a minute or two. But you can also go ahead and keep sending some of those emails in or those questions in if you have them come up later, and we'll try to get to them if at all possible throughout the week before next Wednesday. But again, I just want to thank everybody out there for attending this. Thanks for your Friday night. I know you probably have a million more things that you could be doing. That's a whole lot more important than this right here. I just thought I would do this, one, to share the story of Benghazi personally from me, and be able to have this interaction with you all and answer those questions. But also, again, as I have said already twice, but also as a fundraising platform for Shadow Warriors Project. Again, you know, a lot of people don't realize this, but there's been over 5,000 contractors killed and over probably 30,000 injured in the war since the war on terror started in 2001 in about 80 different countries around the world. Contractors have been a part of every engagement that the U.S. has ever been. Private security contractors are at the forefront of that, making sure people are safe, making sure Americans who work for this country are safe, and filling in those spots where our military war fighters can go on and do the bigger and better things. But, you know, the families are still there. They still suffer, and they don't have the benefits that the military has as military veterans. Even though all of us are military veterans, or the majority of us are that serve, we don't or are not, because our injuries that we get or the death comes, it is not part of the VA system since it's non-military service connected. The mothers, the wives, they don't qualify for the Gold Star wife or the Gold Star mothers either. So that's kind of where we are. We are, as I've said earlier, you know, you've got where whales swim. Below that is the bottom of the ocean. That's kind of where that's where we fall, down there below whale shit, down there with the whale crap. So anything that you guys can do out there, God bless y'all. Thank you for that. Again, looking forward to seeing you guys Wednesday, and we will get on to chapter 5 and try to get through this book as soon as we can. So let me make one last check to see if we have any more questions. No, we don't. So I just want to say thank you, everybody. God bless you. Have a great weekend, and we will be talking to you Wednesday. God bless.